Denbigh Castle and its walls were built to control the domination of Denbigh after Edward I of England conquered Wales in 1282. The land was granted to Henry de Lacy, Earl of Lincoln, who began building a new walled town, which was occupied by English settlers, protected by a large castle and surrounded by a deer park for hunting. Work was not completed until 1294, when the Welsh temporarily occupied the castle during the Mattock Llewellyn Rebellion. The defenses continued to be improved, although the castle was not completed by the time of Henry's death in 1311. The castle passed through several owners during the first half of the 14th century before falling under the control of the Mortimer family. During this time, the walled town proved unsuitable for living, and a much larger new community developed outside the fortifications. In 1400, the walled town was attacked during a rebellion, although the castle itself remained safe throughout. During the Wars of the Roses, Denbigh was attacked by Lancastrian forces. The walled town was attacked and burned, after which the old town was largely abandoned by the townspeople, and the fortified area became an extension of the castle's defenses. Denbigh was occupied by Royalists during the First English Civil War until it was recaptured by parliamentarian forces in October 1646. The castle was recaptured by Royalists in 1659, after which General George Monk ordered it to be abandoned, with some of the walls and towers demolished. The site deteriorated further over the years, and the old fortified town was almost completely abandoned. In the mid-19th century, the town set up a committee to manage the ruins and carry out restoration. The Office of Works took responsibility for the fortifications in 1914, with the site eventually falling under the control of Welsh Cadmeritage. Denbigh Castle is dominated by three octagonal towers, the main entrance, which historian John Goodall regards as the most architecturally sophisticated entrance of the 13th century. 8 mural-covered towers protect the remaining curtain wall, which is further protected by bastions and ramparts and a defensive terrace. The castle is connected to the city walls, which are still largely intact and run around the old town for about 1,100 meters, 3,600 feet. The city walls were once protected by 4 towers and 2 gates, although only 1 gate remains. The castle and the city gates were built of ornamental stone, intended to symbolize royal power and civic pride. Denbigh Castle was built within the grounds of a former Welsh estate called Perfedlad. This estate controlled the Denbigh moors and became the royal residence of the Welsh princes. Perfedlad was strategically located along the Welsh border, but ownership was disputed, and the land was seized by the Normans and Welsh several times during the 11th and 12th centuries. In 1277, the Welsh prince Dafydd ap Griffith received Perfedlad from the English King Edward I, who was then allied with Dafydd in a battle against his brother Prince Llywelyn. Dafydd rebuilt the existing residence into a large castle. It is unclear what the castle was like or where it stood on the site of the present castle, but it consisted of a bakehouse, a buttermill, a chapel, and a hall, and became the main fortification of Dafydd. The Welsh called the town Denbigh, a contraction of Dinas Fession, meaning little fortress. In 1282 Dafydd and Llywelyn rebelled against King Edward, invading North Wales with a large army. After a month-long siege, Denbigh fell to his rule in October 1282. The king established a new lordship to rule the area around Denbigh, which he renamed Denbigh, and granted these lands to Henry de Lacy, Earl of Lincoln. With the help of James of St. George, the king's master bricklayer, Edward and Henry planned a new castle to rule the area, symbolically built on the old castle. Edward traveled to Snowdonia, leaving Henry to continue the work at Denbigh, using local laborers and possibly men brought from Henry's lands in England. The west and south sides of the castle and the new town walls were built first to protect the construction crews, and in 1285 Henry granted the first charter for the new town. Work on the remaining fortifications continued for several years. The castle and town were part of a wider landscape controlled by de Lacy, which included nearby manors, barns, and fish ponds, all important symbols of lordship at the time. Likewise, he created 3 parks around the castle, which were filled with English deer. The city walls encompassed an area of approximately 9.5 acres and had 63 inhabitants in 1285, each of whom promised to provide armed men to help defend the city. The inhabitants were English, many from Henry's estates in northern England, and were supported by other English colonists who had acquired large amounts of rural land in the surrounding area. From the early settlement, the inhabitants began to spread beyond the walls to the flatter ground in the hills, driven by the limited space and insufficient water supply in the inner city, which was unusual in comparison with other walled cities established in Wales at the time. Within 50 years, the outer Mercatoria Villa had covered an area of approximately 57 acres. Work on Denbigh Castle was not completed in September 1294 when a Welsh rebellion, led by Madog ap Llewellyn, broke out. The castle was captured by Welsh forces, despite Henry's attempts to retake it, and the fortress was not retaken until December. The castle's defenses continued to be improved, although they were not fully completed. Perhaps thwarted by the death of Henry's eldest son and an accident at the castle, the ancient fortress's 13 stone towers were explored by Henry de Lacy, a historian in the field of investigations who discovered and conducted eerie sightings, according to internal reports. The most famous investigation was that of a soldier who was believed to have wandered the castle walls during the period when the legend of the ghostly soldier was told. This is a story about the incredible feeling of the soldier's beloved in the castle's fortress and his belief that he was still searching for her behind the beams. The faint signal of a man in distant feet on the organ in the New Grey Research Center. This unseen leader can often be seen in the courtyard, floating in the shadows of the Greenis official chorus. Highlights of the castle and the main control system. The main features are the remaining power control system from the cabin for the Denbigh Taste Control System, so it goes to the point of interest for the supernatural intelligent control system of many drivers have reported columns and descriptions have been separated sound points and electronic direction control signals by the village dungeon administrators that the useful advice of natural activities above by the narrator of the experience that does not emphasize the history and the horror. Denbigh District, the center of beauty with scary technology, ancient core, vast history, and atmospheric scenes create an atmosphere as a topic for stories of haunted houses that help within the walls that are important for you to be interested in the history of leadership or the supernatural. Denbigh also offers a discovery and experience that will help provide a discovery and experience that through the extraction of the elements of time in the dinner above the bee and the shadow of the valley, that will become a rock that cuts the dark sky. The Linn of the Denbigh Valley is again in the investigation of the history of the supernatural, and the legend of the village also adds legend to the history that has been told endlessly, to come to tell the horror stories of the village.